I call the member for Gilmore.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I want to describe a plan. It's a plan for human beings to travel to Mars and establish a new colony. It's going to cost more than several $1 trillion. It's called the Draconian plan. But, Deputy Speaker, I don't actually have the money to follow this plan. I'll just tell everybody about the plan and hope they're so convinced, and if I tell them often enough, then they'll know it's going to be true. Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, this is exactly the same as the fantasy funding of the Labor Party proposed going into the last 2 elections about education. The proposed grandiose plan for educational change, which was unfunded, putting it into the same place as my science fiction plan to get humans to Mars. Really, Mr Deputy Speaker, I would think that by now this rubbish would be exactly where it belongs, in the shredding bin. There are no cuts to school funding. How can you cut something that never existed? The Quality Schools package will deliver an extra $25.3 billion in recurrent funding for Australian schools over the next 10 years. I am so tired of this blatant misrepresentation of information. The opposition keep bleating about cuts, 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 but it's a cut to nothing. It was never committed. Our total Commonwealth recurrent funding is $249.8 billion over about 10 years. For the first time, real needs-based funding will be provided, and it grows from $17.5 billion to $31.1 billion. Nationally, funding per student for all sectors will continue to increase. This is growing. This is an increase. This is more money for our children. By 2027, students with the same needs in the same sector will have the same level of support from the Commonwealth, regardless of the state or the territory where they live, their background or their choice of school the parents make. And as a condition of funding, the states and territories have to pull their weight. They have to co-invest in the education instead of, oh, federal government's putting in money, OK, we'll take ours out. Not good enough. We have to fix that. The new funding is part of $192 million worth of boost for our regions. It's so good that this is actually going to happen. We're delivering a school system that is entirely focused on students and what they need most. This means more resources for one-on-one time with teachers and new or existing initiatives such as specialist teachers or targeted intervention programs, which have been so successful over the last 4 years, of which Labor and Liberal exactly agreed to fund. Under our plan, we're delivering an overall 6.4% average increase of annual growth for each of our children. Our needs-based funding plan has been endorsed by everyone, including David Gonski, the name that was thrown around from one end of parliament to the other. Our needs-based education for students includes not only those with a disability, which is fairly obvious, but also those living in regional, rural or remote locations. And there's a consideration of children in lower socio-economic communities, and also to help close the gap for our Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander kids. For students with a disability, there'll be an increase of about $22.7 million. From this year through to 2027, it's 83.5% increase. It's going up. Students in regional, rural and remote will have an increased investment. That's again increased investment from $3.9 billion to $7.2 billion. That's an increase, getting bigger, 84.8% increase. More than 750,000 students will be better off with these funding on needs-based. I mentioned Indigenous students, and there'll be around 218,000 young students who will be benefiting from this far better targeted increased investment. $285.6 million last year will be increasing up to $547.9 million in 2027. That's a 91.9% increase. Australia is now amongst the highest investors in school education in the OECD. The most important aspect of education is, of course, investment, but the most recent research is, of course, that teachers must be part of the formula of better educational outcomes. I know, I was one. The rationalisation and nationalisation of increased funding is critical for our children. That's fact, not fantasy. Making sure the states and territories commit as well, that's critical, and it's fact, not fantasy. Making sure there's money to fund the investment is essential. Fact, not fantasy.